Hello, my dears. Welcome to my stories. This past year, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. There was about 600 miles of the trail I camped alone. One of these sections I was alone was in Northern California, slightly north of Shasta. I got to a beautiful spot and knew it was the best spot to set up camp. It was gorgeous. 360 views of woods in the valley below and mountains everywhere. I could see it raining on Mount Shasta, probably my favorite campsite in NorCal. I still remember the exact mile and have some footage of the site during daylight. I set up my tent, and after admiring the sunset, I went to bed. I could see outside below the vestibule when I was lying down in the tent. As I was trying to go to sleep, I saw a white light in the valley, maybe about a quarter to a half mile away. Not right near my tent or anything. I wasn't close to any towns. In the Sierra Mountains, south of this area, I would see an occasional remote cabin in the woods, so I figured it was that. But there were no access points or dirt roads, no forest clearings, just thick woods surrounded by mountains. I looked at the light for a bit and tried to think of what it could have been, but this was pretty remote, so I didn't know. I was tired from hiking all day, so I didn't think too much of it. A little later, I looked out again and noticed another light. It was an orange light slowly circling the white light. It was slowly morphing in shape as it circled. I watched it for a long time, trying to understand what I was looking at. It had a very calm motion, and it was almost mesmerizing. It wasn't like a lot of people's orb UFO experiences where it darts around and then vanishes. I eventually fell asleep. It started raining around midnight, and I looked out of my tent and still saw both lights. One white stationary light and one orange morphing light. I woke up again around 4 a.m. to piss and walked outside my tent, and it was still there. Same motion. I tried to get a video, but due to the distance and darkness, it looked like another shitty video that didn't show anything. I woke up around sunrise and looked for it, but both lights were gone. I didn't see these lights around sunset or sunrise, only in darkness. I know these would have been visible during sunrise, sunset too. I'm sure there is an explanation, but I genuinely have no clue what I was looking at. Still trying to figure it out. Unrelated, but near that area I was walking, and to the right of the trail was some thick brush, maybe 5 to 6 ft tall. This was near the Shasta Trinity Forest area, maybe 1 to 2 days after the lights in the woods. I was hiking alone, and I noticed about 100 ft away from the brush was being flattened by something, and it was moving very quickly. It was approaching the trail, and was going to end up right next to me if I had continued my pace. I couldn't see what was flattening this brush, but it had to be strong. It reminded me of something you'd see in Jurassic Park. I assumed it was a bear. I still think it was, but I didn't want to surprise the bear and have a close encounter. I yelled, "Stop!" And then it stopped. Completely. I remained still and waited to see what was going on, but it was completely still, and it was really quiet everywhere. Total silence. I got pretty unsettled and started talking to whatever it was while I walked by. I just kept saying things like, "I am going to walk by and be on my way, my friend. Hope you're having a good day." I kept walking and kept looking back, but nothing moved from that point onward. Like I said, probably a bear. Black bears are generally like big raccoons and don't want to interact with humans. But I encountered a few bears, and they always ran away when I told them to get lost. After speaking with other hikers, I noticed I met a few people said how NorCal was a little unsettling. The so-called desert is very windy, and the Sierra Mountains have tons of flowing streams. NorCal doesn't have as many streams or as much wind, so there is just a silence that pervades, which can feel ominous, especially in the dark. That's my explanation for the feeling, at least. But after going through the so-called desert, Sierra Mountains, NorCal, Oregon, and Washington, NorCal was the only section that was a little unnerving to me. Me and a few buddies decided to go camping on Mount Shasta. Driving up the side of the mountain to the camping spot, we all commented on the energy in the air. Just felt heavy. When we got to our campground, all the other spots were vacant, and that was eerie because we were there during peak camping months. Despite that, We moved forward with our plans and partook in drugs and dinner. After dinner, we sat around the campfire when 2 white school buses with blacked-out windows drove past our tents and further down into the campsite and further up the mountain. Again, we talked about the strange energy and what the buses were transporting at this hour. It was about 10 p.m. We shook it off and started to wind down for bed when my buddy, who was in a different tent, unzipped mine and asked if I could hear chanting. I listened and could definitely hear the same monotone chanting. We decided to investigate. We all got dressed and decided to do a recon mission. It was actually very exciting. We brought flashlights, but all agreed not to turn them on to avoid detection. As we crept up the mountain to where we suspected the group was, we spotted the 2 buses side by side. The chanting was definitely louder, but seemed to originate from behind the buses. We were pretty creeped out at this point, but proceeded. 2 of us went to the back end of the bus, and 3 others went to the front, so we could keep our profile low and figure out what was happening. As I peeked around the back of the bus, I saw about 30 people in full robes, circled around a woman in a chair and a man in a full robe standing next to her. The man in the middle would chant something in another language, sounded Latin, and then the circle of people would repeat the same incantation. We spied on this group of people for about 3 minutes when it dawned on us that this could potentially be a dangerous situation. I signaled to the others in the group to leave, and we speed-hiked back down to our tents. We discussed after and came to the conclusion that it was most likely a cult. I can't speculate what they were doing with the woman in the center. Maybe gangbang, maybe sacrifice, but it all felt very unnatural and unsavory. The next day we decided to pack up early, and we booked it down the mountain to Weed, Oregon, and got a hotel. We still speculate about what we could have stumbled on, and we all get goosebumps talking about it. This is my only experience, but we stayed at a campground in Glacier National Park. It was our second night at the campground, and our friends decided they'd stay that night at the site next to us, owned by natives, and they shared a bunch of cool information with us about their family history, and how centuries of their family have been buried on this land. It was fascinating. This will tie in later. One night I woke up to my boyfriend telling me, "It's okay, it's just the wind." And when I came to, all I heard was insane wind, and our whole tent shaking. Our tent was on top of a jeep as well. Literally felt like we were going to fly away. Montana weather is wild. Anyway, I ask him how long he's been awake, and he tells me quite a bit because something spooked him. He told me that about an hour prior to the windstorm starting, he heard footsteps outside the tent. Little footsteps, to be exact, like a child, mind you. The hosts told us their kids were all over, 17 to 18. My boyfriend said they ran back and forth a couple times, and he kind of knocked it up to be an animal or something and tried to rest, until it came back and he felt something mount the ladder. We have a tent that attaches to our truck for use at home as well. You can always feel when someone is on the ladder. As soon as he felt that, he said, "Hello?" in a very stern voice, and whatever it was dismounted and ran. I tried to reason and say, oh, maybe it was an animal. No, it wasn't. To bring him peace of mind, but we were both spooked at that point, and we were pretty restless. The following morning we woke up and exited our tent. When we approached our friends, we asked how they slept, and most of them said, oh good, pretty normal stuff. We had not seen them nor talked since dinner time night before. One of our friends said, yeah, except his girlfriend psyched herself out and probably had a nightmare. And I asked what happened, and she said to me, I swear to God I heard footsteps going back and forth from the tent. They stopped for a bit, and then came back, and the zipper started to move, and I shouted, who's there? She was definitely spooked, and my boyfriend and I looked at each other, and they all said, what? Then we explained what happened. Long story short, we didn't stay a second night, and I honestly wish we did so I could talk with the hosts. Knowing they are native, the dead mean a lot to them, I wish was able to ask, and maybe they knew or had an experience like this before. In my heart, I know it wasn't their kids, because if they're really that old, I'm sure they aren't that interested in scaring off business for their family. But also, little footsteps was prominent here. And no guests would let their child run around either. It was spooky, but I love spooky things, and I just wonder what it really was.